So we'll just use what we do is wait a couple minutes for people to start jumping on, and Hamadri will communicate with us, and then I'll do an introduction. This part always feels a little silly because you're just kind of sitting there.
You're sitting quiet and you don't want to talk. Yeah. You're talking and they're live. We're live or something.
Yeah.
Actually, we coordinated quite well tonight and we didn't even talk.
Well, good. Yeah. Coordinated colors.
Yeah, even you, Megs. How did you do that? Look at that. We're all both coordinated.
We're all on the same wavelength.
Sorry to be a bother, Mona and Candace, it's showing the space between you two in the Instagram feed. Is there a way, let me check it.
We'll just snuggle right
Get
up.
as close as possible.
Is that better?
I'm just trying to check on there 1 second. Yeah. I'm sorry, I know that's probably uncomfortable. That way everyone can see you.
I'm tickling her on the side here. So there we go. It's funny.
I feel like we're Siamese twins or
I
something.
know, attached. Too funny. What she sees and what we see, we don't know.
And every platform is a little bit different as to like what the screen is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what makes it difficult with on this type of thing rather than in person.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it sounds like we have a couple people that have jumped on to live already. So I think we'll probably kick things off. For those of you that have joined us, thank you so much for spending your evening or part of your evening with us. My name is Megs Reynolds, and I'm the Executive Director for the Do More Agriculture Foundation. We are the national voice and champion for mental health in Canadian agriculture. And joining me today are Mona and Candace, and we are going to talk about bipolar. Thank you both so much for joining us this evening.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I think probably to kick things off, maybe if you guys both want to do a little bit of an introduction, which will lead into the conversation as well. And explain why you're so close and cuddly.
Well, we're attached here. And that's about what has happened since we started this process in 1995 when Candace will talk about her being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And we as a family were struggling to figure out how to support her. And communication was not good. And especially this mother that is talking right now was not the best communicator. And we had to learn what to do different in order for things to work. And, one thing was that we couldn't do any blaming and all of that, which we all started out with. But also not knowing how to listen properly and hear somebody. And that was huge. And that was the part that I really had to learn, was to know how to listen, how to understand where Candace was at, and that so that we can work together to figure out what to do to help and be supportive to her, but the whole family to keep moving forward together as well. Mm-hmm. And so that was a quick introduction for me. I'm the mom.
I'm Candace Watson, and I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder 1 in 1995. And it's been a bit of a journey with the highs and the lows and multiple hospitalizations. But overall, I would say I've been a high functioning person that has, it's not I like to tell people there's lots of hope. Don't be discouraged if you're diagnosed with this illness. There's lots of hope, and there's struggles along the way, but you can learn to live well with it. I've gone on and got my MBA in school, and hold down a job, have a wonderful family. So I just want to have that message of hope for everybody.
Yeah, thank you. I've had a note from Hamadri, so if it's possible to move your guys' laptop a little bit further away from you, I think even with how close you are, we're still having trouble fitting. There we go. That's probably better.
Got
Into
better?
the screen. Yeah. For those of you also that have joined us live, we did, through part of our Talk It Out series, we did a one-on-one interview with both Candace and Mona, and those are on our Do More Ag YouTube, which are great to check out if you haven't already done so. Mona, do you want to talk a little bit about, and both of you guys, what you do for work as well, just to give some context to everything?
Mhm. Well, because of this starting in our family, having to really work through the challenging points, I actually focused on the family piece. And at that time, we were a Canadian Mental Health Association, which championed that piece of it. And also another girl and I developed a psychoeducation program for 6 weeks. But then it got to the drop-in because people were needing more and needing to be to drop in and visit and everything else. And then in 2008, I started my own company, Cool Family Solutions, which focuses on the family. And we have a 10-week program where families that are supporting a loved one living with mental illness, addiction, or there's conflicts and different things like that, and can participate. And plus it's been piloted since 2018, and we've got quite high reviews as well for that.
And for me, I worked as a nurse for 20 years in a variety of settings. I worked labor and delivery to start, then emergency, adult psychiatry, HealthLink. I did a computer job with the Calgary Health Region, and then went back to school and got my MBA and graduated, and then came out, and I am currently employed with the Canadian Mental Health Association Calgary Region. I work in the finance department as a project coordinator.
Amazing. I think it's so important to highlight what both of you are doing. One, Mona, how that is stemmed from your personal experience as a family. But then also Candace, I think there's, it's so important for people to understand that you can have a diagnosis like this, and that isn't, doesn't end your possibilities and what you can engage in. I think maybe the next best step is, what to create part of a definition around what is bipolar. If there are people tuning in that maybe don't know much about it, maybe they've heard the term before, but they don't know what could come with that mental health condition.
Yeah, so maybe I'll speak to that. Yeah. So bipolar, there's a range of symptoms and as well as degrees. So there's bipolar 1, bipolar 2, like cyclothymia. Anyways, they're all varying degrees of elevated moods and depressive moods. And I myself am diagnosed with bipolar 1, so I could speak most to that. But you develop symptoms like a very elevated mood, high energy, and the manias. For me, I get very ill with it, so I do develop psychosis with it, which means that I have a break from reality. So I get delusions with it. So for me, I get delusions of grandeur, they call it. So I think I'm going to be the CEO of Alberta Health Services, and on and on and on. It just very elevated thinking. And you have lots of energy, you can make irrational decisions. And then the low side is maybe more what people are more familiar with is the depression, and you feel low moods, low energy, just not feeling good about yourself and who you are. And some people get suicidality with it, thinking of suicide or attempt suicide. So and then it varies from there. Like some don't get psychosis with bipolar 1, but I just happen to. So I just would speak to that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think she explains it the best. She lives with it.
And it was I'm just thinking back to when we had our original conversation, it was that manic side where you guys, that was kind of the initial, okay, something's going on here that is outside of maybe being a little
I
depressed
had
or?
in grade 11, I had a depression, but I didn't really tell anybody about it. And I had mood swings for sure prior to that, but it was nothing that was diagnosable or that I spoke much about or anything. We just kind of lived with it. And then, yes, my first manic episode, I had psychosis and everything, and all the high energy, delusional thinking, everything came along with it. And we had no idea what we were dealing with. And me, it being my first episode, didn't think anything was wrong. I
Right.
thought everybody else, there was something wrong with them. So, I didn't believe what they had to say about needing to take me to the hospital and stuff like that. So I obviously fought all of that. And I fought the fact that I had bipolar disorder. I didn't believe it at first. And so that first episode was definitely traumatizing for the family and for me. I was taken to hospital against my will and injected, and it was very traumatizing. But we've got through that now, and I've had other hospitalizations since, but we are familiar with the symptoms. So usually now, like, I haven't been hospitalized for a mania in 14 years. Once the symptoms come, what's weird with me is they're the same every time. So it's like, oh, here it is again. And we just medicate and get on it. And I have a psychiatrist and a nurse. I'm taken care of out of the bipolar disorder clinic in Calgary at the Foothills Hospital. So I kind of have a team of professionals that help me through everything. But mostly I have my husband and family, and my husband picks up just as quick as I pick up on the symptoms, and we just start medicating. Even if we haven't talked to my doctor right away, we know what medications to get on board right away, and then we get in contact with them as soon as we can, and then get further guidance as an episode is progressing. The good thing is because we're on it so quick, we turn it around really fast. In the beginning stages, it wasn't like that. It took longer to get on top of things, and then because of that, it got more out of control. Longer hospitalizations, like I'd be sick for 3 months, whereas now if an episode creeps up, we can turn it around in days to a week. And that being said, like through my whole MBA, like my block weeks at the beginning of school, I would get some symptoms, we'd get on top of it, and I'd still go to school and learn what I needed to learn on top of having all the medication on board. And I just had someone drive me to school, and so we just work well as a family now, and we just get on top of things. But it's hard at the beginning when you're not sure how to deal with it, or you're learning symptoms and how your body responds to things.
Yeah, it's incredible where you're at now with everything. I remember you saying that, how right away you can tell, and then there's that procedure that kind of what to do and how to control things from the beginning. And I think it's, just to link it to, oftentimes we can be a little weird about mental health, where we don't want to, take that initiative at the beginning because we're worried, like, well, maybe this isn't it, or we haven't accepted it, or what is someone going to say about medication? But, if you think about any other type of illness, the longer you put it off before going to get help or getting medication, the longer it takes to treat and to heal. And so I think that that's such a crucial point to make, is the importance of, okay, this is going on, this is now the how we treat this and what is needed to do that. And just oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's hard because some people also don't have full insight as to what's going on. And my doctor said that I'm unusual a little bit, in that I have a lot of insight, especially at the beginning when symptoms are starting, and not everybody has that full insight. So I think that's something to be aware of too, if you're a family member supporting somebody, that it's not that maybe that they don't, they're trying to resist you, but maybe they're just not fully aware, and that awareness not everybody has that. And for me, the longer I'm sick, the less awareness I have. But at the beginning, I have enough awareness to get, to get on board with things. But if you do have that awareness, getting on top of it is good. But it's hard with mania, I would say, because you feel good. So it's hard to say, oh, I got to take this medication to not feel so good. Like,
Yes.
it's a hard thing to want to balance out.
For sure. I can see that. And you've spoken about the family support that you have. Mona, do you want to talk about kind of what that was like at the beginning? What you've done with Cool Family Solutions that has stemmed from the fact that you said, we're not good at this, right? We're not good at the communication, the support piece, and kind of how you work through all of that at the beginning to get to the place where you guys are now.
A lot of trial and error. And I think that was the key thing, because there wasn't anything for families. I even asked if there was something, but there wasn't anything at that time and the key thing to it is skills, getting the skills that you need. And, when Candace said to me, Mom, you don't listen. And by the way, quit telling me what to do and help me problem solve. I thought I was listening. No, I was fixing. I was jumping in to give her ideas, and this is what she should do, and all of this, which was upsetting her, because now she's getting told what to do, and that does not work. And that part, so I had to step back and really start to listen to what she was saying and reflect back what she said. And once I started doing that, that's when it made a difference for her that, oh, finally somebody's listening to me instead of telling me what to do. And because we have the tendencies to fix and rescue and enable, and that is not fair to them, because that's disempowering them rather than empowering them.
But we feel like we're helping by doing that.
Oh yeah.
Makes us feel good.
Yeah. And that's the natural thing to do, but we had to learn how to do that better as well.
Well, it was interesting in the manias because, especially when I was hospitalized, so back in the earlier days when I was really sick, they had to figure out, because I would have certain beliefs going on in my head that obviously weren't reality, but they had to learn to kind of work with what was going on in my head rather than just constantly challenging it and saying, well, that's not right, that's not true. Why are you thinking that? Rather than that questioning, they just worked with what was actually going on in my brain. So like an example of it was, one hospitalization, I thought that I worked on the sexual assault team in the emergency department. And I thought one of the ladies I worked with needed some, I don't know, something was coming off my body. I can't remember what it was, but the evidence was going to be on my sheets. I can't explain what it all was about now, but anyways, the evidence was going to be on my sheets. And I told my mom, you must take these hospital sheets to this person in the emerge department that I work with. And so my mom's presented with this irrational thinking and problem, but rather than challenging me and saying, no, that's not right, that's not, she just worked with me because she'd learned over the years, and she just said, Candace, if I take these hospital sheets, that would be stealing. And for whatever reason, that triggered me. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. Like, you can't steal the hospital sheets from this room or whatever. And that made me let go of the whole incident to take the sheets. So I don't know that it would work for everybody, but I have worked with patients on the psych unit, and I kind of take that into account when I'm working with people, is trying to, rather than challenge every little thing that they're thinking, is just work with the thoughts that they are having and try and problem solve within that.
And that's exactly right. And that incident was because, and then she said, oh, I don't want to get you into trouble. And so that stopped the whole process. And that's the hardest part, is go where they're at and give a perspective rather than, and I gave a perspective going, I'm going to be in trouble if I do this. And that was one of the things, but really listening to her. And there was times when she would phone and she'd be quite high. And I could go to that level myself very quickly. I had to learn to bring my voice down. I had to slow my pace and be a little more calmer. And that's what helped her to all of a sudden come down like this. And this was making a huge difference. But these were little techniques. Now, something that I didn't say in the beginning is I went to Coach U University for 4 years, all by phone. So my listening was there, but it was skill sets that's what helped me to get there, because it was listening, asking questions, understanding all of those pieces. So, and I was just in the process of going to the Coach U at that time. So she was a good one to practice on and see if I could get it right. But these were the things that we had to learn. And so that she felt that she could talk to us about these things.
I think that's such an important point to say, of like, you need to meet someone where they're at, because I mean, for anyone, whether you're going through something or you just have an opinion, the second somebody is like hard against that and says, no, you're wrong, you either want to shut down or you want to push back against what they're telling you, right? For anyone out there watching on the live, you are able to put questions if you have them into the chat on the live, and we will make sure that we bring them up. So please feel free to do so. Mo and I remember one of the things we talked about in our interview were boundaries. So do you guys want to talk about that from both sides of how important boundaries are, but also kind of how you figured out what works and what doesn't work throughout the process?
Yeah, and boundaries became, well, that in the very beginning when we first had to take her to the hospital, and her dad was working in northern Alberta, and I was the one going up to visit her at the time. And each day she was very upset with me and angry at me and everything else. And blame comes in because, you know, this whole situation was very, very difficult and everything else. And I went home each day and I thought, God, I couldn't say anything because it was coming out wrong. And all of these things were wrong. And I had my meltdown at home where, you know, I didn't know what to do and ask questions. So I decided after 10 days that I'd go in, and when she started to blame me, I said, no more, because this isn't getting us anywhere to go anywhere. And yeah, I haven't been the perfect mother and doing everything right, but we need to stop the blaming either way and start here, what we figure out together. And that was my boundary. And she, you know, she knew that the boundary was set, and I said, I would just go home. You know, if we're going to just do that, that's not going to work. But the other boundary that she put in was, Mom, you don't listen, and quit telling me what to do. And that was her boundary because, and as I mentioned that earlier, and that was good for me too. So setting those boundaries are clear. And so it helps each other to move forward, because we want the relationships. That's what we want in the end. And that's what was so important. But we had to go through that. We had our differences of opinion along the way, but we've learned, and our family have taken the time to learn how to be there for one another and figure this out. But boundaries are key. But it's being clear. I feel frustrated when this happens, and I would, you know, don't want to hear this or whatever it is. And so that, but we got to pay attention to that. And sometimes we don't pay attention to that.
And I would agree with that. I would say, I would just add that, like, currently, we have boundaries in how we deal with everything. My parents are not involved in my day-to-day symptom monitoring or my medication monitoring. Like, that's really none of their business. Every day I talk to them, I'll call them and we just chat, but nobody's on me all the time about how I am or what's going on. And really, that's Colin and I deal with that at home. Like, if symptoms are arising, he sees it, I see it, we get on it. Usually we will inform our family pretty quickly that something's happening, because often we need supports in place fairly fast. And that's where they step in and they know their role. But in the beginning, it was messy and people didn't have a role or this, you know, didn't know what to say or it's like walking on eggshells a little bit. And I was fragile in the beginning too. So I think it was a lot harder for people to know what to say to me, because honestly, nothing was the right thing, because I just didn't feel good and was upset about everything. So, but I just an encouragement that it does get better with time if you put in the effort and the time to figure things out and work with each other and set those boundaries, and know that you don't have to be involved as a parent in the, well, I guess depending on the age of your child and stuff. But for me, I was an adult, I'm married, I have kids, like nobody needs to be involved in my day-to-day medication administration. Like I do that myself. My husband is not even really involved in that unless I start to get sick. Then he steps in, because then he monitors a little bit of what I'm taking. Because if I start to get more drugged from the medication, I start to lose track of what I've taken, and he writes it down and keeps track of it. But so we each have our roles. Mom and dad, my in-laws, they'll come help with the kids if they need to, driving them places. Like I said, I was doing my MBA. My dad would step in and drive me up to the university so I could actually be present at my course. I'm not sure how much I learned in those few days, but yeah, everybody just has their role now and steps in and does what they need to do. And
I think that's a good point that Candace brings up too, is the role. And that's where families struggle. What is my role in this process? And how do I not step in? And when do I step in? And how do I step in? And that's exactly what it was. And that's what we had to learn, is our role was a support. Colin basically was the one that would say, phone up and say, Mona, can you come over and be with Candace at this time? Yep, I can do that. And it was just to come over and support. It wasn't really getting into anything. And if she was struggling with something, like there was an incident where she was, very emotional and crying, and I came over that day. But I worked on how to have her part of the process, and she was wanting to get something sorted out, and it wasn't working, and she was feeling frustrated with it. And I said, so who do you think can help you? I asked her the question, what she thinks, not me saying, well, maybe I should phone or I should do this and no, what do you think? And she's, oh, you could call this we could call this person. I said, do you want me to call or would you like to call? She says, would you call? Because right now I can't seem to stop crying. So I phoned and left a message, and this gal phoned back, came over, sat down with her. And that was it. Like she actually settled down right after that, but it was bringing her into the process, being part of the solution, not feeling that she's part of the problem.
Well, and not taking control away either.
And not, yes, exactly. Giving that control back and letting her, because she could help with that, because I didn't know who would be best to help with this situation. I just didn't know, but she did. And that brings them into the process. So my role as a mom and her dad is really support. And we all know what to do. And I'll share even another little story. Is one of her sisters. She wanted to go and see Candace and whatever. So she snuck her puppy at the time in her coat and took it to the hospital. And went in to be with Candace and brought the puppy. Well, what that did was that was her way to help. And she's a nurturer in this. And so that way it was something that she could bring in, and that could be the conversation, or that'd be the calming part of the whole situation. And it was perfect. And her, the other ones all had stepped in. She has a sister that's a nurse. She stepped in and supported us as well. And when there's situations that come up, and her brother did the same thing. Like everybody did their role and knew how to do it. And that helped Candace a lot.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think just the empowering piece, like when you're giving kind of the control back to the person who's sick in the moment, they already feel like things are a little out of control. So when you give them the control back and you empower them to make decisions, and it lets them see that they can do things, this situation is, not that bad. Like you can get through it, and you can be a part of the solution, and not just, like Mom said, be told what to do. No one wants to just be told what to do. And so it's empowering. It makes a person feel better, whether you're on the low end or the high end, to empower someone to make decisions and be a part of a solution is definitely helpful.
Yeah, and I think too, and Candace can comment on this too as well, is they're trying to build up their confidence again. And that was part of right at the very beginning. It shapes your confidence, your self-esteem, all of those pieces. And so part of that is, how do we support building that in to them to feel good? And like she talked about wanting to be the CEO of Alberta Health Services. And so one day we went for a walk, and she asked me, so Mom, what do you think? Can I be the CEO of Alberta Health Services? And I thought, ooh, if I say yes, it could be this, and it's no, it could be this. And he says, you know what? I really think that there'd be a time, but I know that you do a lot of research, and I'm thinking at this time, if it works for you, you maybe need to do a little more research on what that involves and everything else. So it's maybe not today, but because she's very good at research. And so I went to her strength, and that helped her to know I didn't say yes and I didn't say no, but I went to her strength. And she said, yeah, that is something that she could. And then we walked on, and that really was the leveled it out. I didn't argue, and you don't win. Neither wins.
Neither wins. Yeah. Yeah. That's, I think, in most things, right?
It's true. Yeah.
We've had a question come in. Candace, during your journey, have you ever experienced treatment resistance? So when medication stopped working, and if so, how did you navigate that?
I don't know if I would technically say I've ever had treatment resistance, but I've had to be on so many different medications at different times. Some of it was part pregnancy stuff. Like I had to, all 3 of my pregnancies, I was on completely different medications for. Often, like, they were having a hard time finding what combination worked for me. I was really, really sick after my first child was born. That's where I ended up at the bipolar disorder clinic, because I just was so ill. And I was so sick during that pregnancy. I was hospitalized for mania and everything. And it's been a journey of just trying to figure out the right drugs at the right time. And honestly, it changes like the wind sometimes. Like, I'll be good on I was good on medications for like about 4 years, this little pocket of meds I had, and then suddenly it just wasn't working very well for me anymore. So then we had to go through the whole rigmarole of changing things up. And so I feel like I'm on this, it's a never-ending journey of medication changes, and I just try to adapt. And it's not always easy, it's hard. I was actually hospitalized last summer for the first time in 14 years, and it was a difficult hospitalization, but come out the other end. But because of that hospitalization and the things that led up to it, I ended up having to go through a whole medication change again, which is really, I can identify with anyone that's going through that. Like, it's really difficult on you. It's your emotions are all over because you're trying to adapt or trying to get it right. But now I'm again back on a great balance of medications. I do get side effects from things, so we're even currently working on tweaking that a little bit. But my psychiatrist is great, and I have an open conversation with her and just say, this is working, this is not working, and she goes, okay, what can we do to tweak this? And so I would say my journey has been a constant evolvement of medications. So I don't know if treatment resistant would be right, but just definitely changes.
And there's
And that makes sense, especially with pregnancy, right? Like how much your hormones change. And then as you get older, your hormones are constantly changing as well. Probably,
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor, but I can see that more in women as well too, possibly. And just the challenges that that could bring to what is working one day and then suddenly not working the next day.
Yeah, exactly. And the side effects, unfortunately, there are side effects to most medications. And so you're trying to balance the need to be on medications and to take medications, but also to feel good while you're on the medications and not be like, one of my side effects right now is I'm just really sleepy in the morning. And part of that was a big change in the medications we had to do last summer. So we're just currently pulling back a little bit on one of them. But again, we have to be super careful because if symptoms arise, so I just monitor really closely what's happening. I talk to my psychiatrist regularly about what's going on, and we just tweak really slowly or to her recommendation. But she's really great too, because she is always like, Candace, you know, this is what I'm thinking as a recommendation. What do you think about it? And so like we always have this open conversation about what do I think is going to work, and she'll ask my opinion sometimes and be like, what do you think of this? And I'm like, yeah, okay, well, let's try that. Or, you know, she gives me options, and so but it's a journey. It's every day is a journey. Every day is a little bit different. Every year is a little bit different. So I can't say. So.
And I think that brings up the important piece of, it may not be the first psychiatrist that you connect with, but like how important it is to find someone that you can have that relationship with. And then how important it is to have that honesty, both with yourself and with that person, as to like, hey, this is what I'm feeling. This is how I'm reacting. This is what is happening at all times, so that you are able to figure out those medication changes or what can arise from something working or not working, or just tweaking things.
Yeah, definitely. And that relationship is a huge thing for me. And I feel very fortunate because I do connect with my psychiatrist. And I've always been a patient that I follow whatever we've decided. I follow through on that. I feel like that's my responsibility as a patient, that I want to get better. I also need to be listening to what my psychiatrist is talking about and recommending. And if we've agreed to something, then I follow through on that. And if it becomes an issue or something's not right, I go back to her before I start making changes and stuff, because that can get you into trouble, especially with this illness.
And I think too, on the family side, that was what was really good, is that we knew that she had, and actually her psychiatrist has worked with us as a family and really had that support of how we have supported her in this process and everything else. And I think that is huge. And that doesn't always happen. As Candace said, that doesn't always happen, but that's been one of the fortunate pieces in this journey as well, that we had that support from her, and she believed in the family being a big piece of it as well.
Well, and that, yeah, exactly. Like my doctor, she, you know, for the most part, I go to appointments on my own when I have them, but if I start to get ill, Colin joins me. And if it's like, if I'm getting quite ill, he joins, we have conversations together. So it's a family decision where we're going with something. Colin has input, I have input, my psychiatrist has input. My parents have come on my appointments before. If I was really sick, Colin wasn't available. Like, you know, but sometimes I need somebody there to, if I'm not thinking clearly, you know, I can't just take back the information necessarily in the most, you know, correct way. So sometimes I need that person there to support me. And so my psychiatrist is great that way. So
I think that's what's key, is that support system, and, you know, that she can call on us and the family, you know, her siblings as well as Colin's family as well, which is huge for her and for them as well in this whole process. And that's what does make a difference. But we've all had to learn, and as Candace says, it's a journey. we're going to have these ups and downs and these moments. She mentioned last summer, well, that was one, but we were already tuned in and knew our roles and what to do and how to approach it and how to support her and everything else. We weren't learning at that point, and that made a huge difference, and that has Candace being able to feel confident in and the families being able to be there for her when it's needed. And they are the lead, like Colin and her are the lead. We're not the lead. We just wait for their direction and how we can support, and they do know where to go to for the help.
Mm-hmm. Before we wrap things up tonight, are there any points, advice that we haven't touched on that you both would like to share?
Well, one I'll share, and I know in the beginning it wasn't the most popular thing, but I did talk about what we were going through with some friends and everything else. And I remember Candace very upset, but people were sending her cards, and her friends were. She was upset with me because, and I said to her honestly, I want to talk about it and have more understanding, because a lot of people weren't understanding what she was going through, and I defended that. And so that is so important, because I had learned what she was going through, what it meant, what was that, and what our role was. And so because we're out there, and Candace willing to come in to speak as well and do that, that has helped us to move forward and being able to help others. Staying quiet has not paid off, in so many ways. And I see that in so many ways. But I know you got to trust, and I know that's a big piece as well. But that's
it's a bit of a process, because when you're first diagnosed, I can't, in this day and age, it's a little bit differently. I mean, I was diagnosed, quite a long time ago, and mental health wasn't talked about as much. It is talked about much more now. I don't think there's as much secrecy around it, but definitely when I was diagnosed, there was. But I would speak to a bit of the self-stigma I had of myself, was I didn't want anybody to know I had this. I was worried about it affecting my job, am I going to get jobs if I have this, if they know I have this illness? How is it going to affect my relationships with friends, everybody? And I didn't want people to think any differently of me than what they thought before I was diagnosed and had this psychotic episode. So it was embarrassing to me. Like, I was a high achiever in school. I did really well. I was well respected in my work environment, and I didn't want to crush that. And so, the family speaking to other people about my illness was very upsetting to me. And so I didn't want people to know. And honestly, at the time, it probably took me 10 years to get to the point where I was like, okay, to just even talk amongst people who were struggling, and it wasn't like an outside thing. But then eventually I sat on the board of directors for the Canadian Mental Health Association. They started to ask me to do public speaking events. And so slowly but surely I started doing more and more and more. And to be honest, it was the most healing thing that I had ever been through. And I think is what got me to where I am today. Is I don't live in secrecy. I can't say I go and just announce to people that I have this. I really don't. Like, I don't, hi, I'm Candace, I have bipolar disorder. I don't announce it wherever I go. But if somebody's struggling or talking about something, I'll identify with them and try and help them along, or, that kind of thing. If it's something like this and it's a session, I'm more than willing to talk about my illness. And, I have lots of family and friends that will constantly connect with me and say, will you talk to this friend? They're going through this struggle. Can you please help them? And obviously I'm more than happy to help them. So, but it's been a journey, and but I'm on that side of things now, where I see the benefit of of sharing in a safe space. And, you know, people at work know I have this illness, and I'm not embarrassed by it. It's actually something that I did tell each employer that I went to. And I said, I do have bipolar disorder, because I was a nurse for 20 years. And I just said, I can't work night shift. That is my limitation for working on this unit. I cannot work nights. It affects my illness. And so, you know, if I were to take a job here, I can't do that. So I was always upfront with an employer that way, but all employers don't need to know, you know, what your illness is or whatever. But I just chose to do that in those circumstances. But
And as Candace says, it was a process. And the more that I was, you know, talking, you know, sharing and different things, but I was sharing more from what I was learning too. It wasn't, you know, wasn't all about what she was going through, even, and it was tough. But I point back here very quickly that I had to make changes. And that's one point I do want to say, is that the family need to take a look back in themselves. It isn't always about what the loved one is doing or not doing. It's about what you are, because I know through this whole process, I had to clean up a lot of things in my own life, and that's what had to be done. And that's why I can help families now. And that's what I focus on. And when the people families come into the 10 weeks, it isn't about them. It's about them, the one that's sitting in front of me. And lots of times individuals in families are going through a lot of stuff. And that's what we focus on. And I want to say that because lots of times loved ones think that their parents are talking about them. Not really. It's not about them. It's about what they're doing and how they're approaching situations and how they're going to, you know, have conversations and build that relationship. And so that their loved ones feel that they can open up and share what they feel and think. And also they read the fear in, you know, they see the fear or the angst in you and everything. They read those pieces, and you want them to feel like they can come to you and you're just going to be there for them and listen. So I want to make that point.
yeah, I think the skills development through this whole journey is like key. And you can't think that you have all the skills. Just, you know, you need to learn some things. And so just like Mom said, looking at yourself and saying, what skills do I need to learn to help us improve in our situation, in our home, in our house? And honestly, it's not been, you know, I wouldn't wish this really on anybody. It's hard to live with, but at the same time, it's brought our family very close together. We have great communication now. I would say our communication was fractured a bit when I was sick before I got sick. And now communication is great, and we're very open. And like I say, we all have our roles. We communicate well, and there's benefits to it if you can put in the time and the effort.
Well, and Candace has said this too, and it was a gift. Now that isn't always the best word to use, but it was a gift because our family was falling apart. I stood in the kitchen one night and saw everybody split in the house, and we weren't having our relationship working and everything. And that was collapsing, which was hurting me as much as anybody and the rest of the family. And so that actually happening to us woke every one of us up, including me, in this whole process. And that's why I do the work I do. That's why. And that's why Candace is willing to share this, you know, because we were on a downward spiral. I'll tell you that.
I think it's an important message for everyone that we all need to do the work, right? And I think that that's lifelong, like to keep trying to progress with, you know, our skills, whether it's learning coping mechanisms for ourselves, learning how to be better listeners, communicators. That's a process, and they're all, you know, we each have pieces to own in that. That we've, you know, packed into a bag and drug along for the journey. But I just, you know, I want to thank you both so much for being involved this month in the interviews and now our live Talk It Out session. And Candace, I know like your story being brave enough and comfortable enough to share. Every time you do it, it helps so many people. And I know the fact that we had people excited about and reaching out to us about tonight is because, you know, you're here and you're having this conversation. So thank you both so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Very
It's
welcome.
Our pleasure.
Yeah.
For anyone looking to learn more information, you can check out our YouTube links or our YouTube channel, sorry, Do More Agriculture. We have all of these videos posted there, or you can head over to our website, which is domore.ag. If you're looking to connect to a peer-to-peer support platform that's fully anonymous and monitored 24/7 by mental health clinicians, you can go to our website at domore.ag/agtalk. Thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a good night.